Welcome back to another episode of Innovation Minutes Live.
Today we are diving into the topic of how the workplace can sometimes be a little authoritarian and how we got to this place and where do we go from here? You and I have talked about how it's interesting that when we're at work, especially in large corporations and within an office, we're often expected to behave in ways that we aren't expected to behave in basically every other aspect of our lives, where part of who we are becomes truncated and sort of blocked because it's deemed inappropriate for the workplace.
I mean, to me, it's just such an interesting phenomenon that we've kind of arrived at this place where in most large companies, we show up at work and we clock in, and we're generally asked to check our values and our morals and our beliefs at the door and adopt an entirely new set of beliefs and processes and ways of doing things and ways of talking and acting with our peers and people outside and inside the company. And it's just an amazing thing. This doesn't happen anywhere else in any other context, right? So it's just a fascinating thing that we've gotten to this point and we're not really having this larger conversation.
It creates a real fear-based culture also. When you're constantly afraid that you're going to step outside of the bounds, that hamstrings your performance and your output significantly. And when you're operating from a place of fear in your life in general, it's oppressive, it's suffocating, and I would argue it's not generally sustainable if health and well-being is also part of your goal.
Right. Nor does that kind of atmosphere promote innovation or creative thought, right? There's no room for that. And it's really interesting. We live in this liberal democracy, right, where we value life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's kind of our thing here. And we essentially, in most large corporations, we go to work and it's like we're walking into North Korea, where there's this imposed set of things that's just the way it is, and you accept it or you have to leave.
It kind of reminds me of growing up, going to Catholic school and private school, where there was no negotiation. There was no necessarily a room for your interpretation of something. It was a set of guidelines, and there was probably a vice principal whose sole purpose was to make sure that you were following the guidelines just because. I used to sort of make it my unofficial job to see how much I could push those boundaries. I remember once in junior high, my good friend and I decided that we would wear slippers to school. I wore these Bigfoot slippers because in the handbook, it didn't say you cannot wear slippers. It just said that you had to have shoes on. And so we would sort of force the administration to constantly create new rules to accommodate our interpretation, our creative interpretation of them. But I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I think we've seen this kind of thing, and I had a very similar experience with Catholic school. I always felt the need to, maybe this just speaks to our personalities, but to kind of just push a little bit, because I think that's the natural human instinct when confronted with that level of control, right? Is to not be put in that box.
Also, I think there are certain things, certain ethical behaviors that can be expected in any community in society. And there can be repercussions for that. But then you really have to dig deeper and think, okay, is following protocol here actually making this a better place? Is it enhancing my work? Is it making my coworkers feel better? Is it making my customers feel better? And I think we can look at two recent examples in United Airlines and Wells Fargo, where we have quote unquote protocol and a sort of authoritarian decree from higher up saying this is what needs to happen, and then employees following suit to their own peril.
Yeah. And it's also kind of amazing that at no point in the process, right, either at Wells or at United, and with this recent airline incident, did anybody kind of stop and think, is this the way that I would treat a friend or a relative or a neighbor, or even, somebody walking down my street? Is what's happening to this person okay, or is what we're doing to these people, is this okay, based on my own personal beliefs, right? The values that I hold.
Right. And I think that's an important point, because too often we think straying from these rules or this protocol, some sort of an assignment that's been given to us is about either slacking, which of course we've talked about that too can be a good thing in the right context, but it's either about slacking or about rebelling just for the sake of it. And we forget that sometimes rebellion against authority is due to a dissonance in our ethics and our values and who we are as people. And to say that what this job tells me to do is more important or takes precedent over who it is that I am is a problem, and we're seeing that more and more in a lot of these companies. Again, because of the fear of losing the job, the fear of not having that quote unquote perceived security.
Right, right.
So we would love to hear if you've seen this type of behavior in places that you've worked or companies you've worked with, where there's a sort of loss of humanity in exchange for more of a hierarchy and authoritarian approach to the workplace, and what the repercussions have been. So please find us in the comments and let us know your thoughts.
Yep, and we'll see you next week.